Material culture or crafts, compared to the West, Florida doesn't have much at all. There are whole crafts that don't exist, whole areas of cowboy crafts that don't exist in Florida. For instance, horsehair braiding. I don't know anybody who does horsehair braiding in Florida. It's big out west. Rawhide braiding. We don't do that. For one thing, rawhide doesn't work well out here because when it's wet, it doesn't work. So we even avoid rawhide trim on saddles. We have quite a few whip makers, a lot of makers of nylon whips, which is the newer style, but and what you'll see today out in the demonstration area, and just a few that make deerskin whips. In fact, I know of 3, and I probably, I might be as aware as anyone of how many are out there. You know, there's this fella, Buddy Mills, learned from his father, he makes them, and a fella named Faircloth up in the Panhandle. Saddle makers, we have a few saddle makers. Probably the most well-known among the working cowboys is Mike Wilder down in Kenansville, which is just south of Kissimmee, between Kissimmee and Yeehaw Junction. And this is actually a fancy saddle for him, and you can see it's not all that fancy, but that was a commemorative saddle for the 2006 Cross Florida Cattle Drive. So it's got a lot more decoration on than what he usually does. Running out of time. This is a leather worker, Poppy Moe in Ocala. I just want to point out that these chaps that she makes are for rodeos and parades. Florida cowboys don't use chaps. They're too hot. And we don't have, out west, like in Texas, they say every plant we have has a thorn or a sticker or a barb on it. We don't quite have that problem here. Branding irons used to be forged by a blacksmith, now they're welded. Our ranch entry gates is an interesting form of material cultural expression. This is the Babcock Ranch down near Punta Gorda in Charlotte County. This is a modern ranch gate this design was cut with a computer-controlled plasma arc machine, which makes for a lot more fancy designs. We have 2 spur makers that I know of, Billy Davis in Kenansville, who comes from a long line of working cowboys, and Jeremy Evans in Marion County. Wanted to point out here, not so much the use of the spur, but this lace-up boot. That's something that's characteristic of a lot of Florida cowboys. They spend a lot of time on the ground because our ranches aren't so big. We have the largest beef cattle herd in the U.S., but we don't have the largest ranch because we get a good ranch gets 3 acres per cow-calf. Out west, it's 25 and up. So our ranches don't have to be as big. I think the King Ranch is over 1 million acres, but it has, I think, 30,000 head of cow. So there are whole crews that use these lace-up boots. The downside of a lace-up boot is if you get your foot caught in a stirrup and the horse is dragging along, you can't get out of it. With a slip-on boot, you might get out of it. And this is the fellow who's wearing that boot, Doyle Rigdon. He works for Likes Brothers as a working cowboy. He's also a poet. Another oral art form is rodeo announcing. And this fella he's at the Silver Spurs Rodeo, mounted on a horse with a spotlight on him. This was during the opening, with a cordless mic, using the latest technology. And he will banter back and forth with the rodeo clown, that serve an important function in keeping the rodeo moving, keeping the audience excited. You can't see it, but this fella has a wireless headset mic on, so he can banter back and forth. They do jokes where, their one line follows another, and the clown comes up with the punchline. By the way, that's his, he said, my A horse was too good for this. My B horse was lame, so I brought my C horse. This is a father and son team, Hollywood and Boogerhead from down in Micanopy. They're national. They travel all over the country working, doing clowning at professional rodeos. Auctioneering is a great oral skill. The cattle, for the most part, are auctioned off one at a time. So some of the large ranches, and particularly the Seminoles that have uniform large herds, they'll do video auctions, but most cattle are sold one at a time. It takes about 10 seconds to auction off a cow. And this is where they go after these are all, each pen is a buyer's pen. There's a PA system. They direct the cattle to go to these pens, and then they're loaded in the truck for that buyer. Of course, there's a lot of storytelling and tales that are passed on. This particular shot shows Mr. Perry Savage, and the story on him is that he was working cows, not this day, but down in Indian River County in the 1950s, and he got hooked, he got gored. They were working the cows in a pen, and his buddy hollered to him, "Did she hurt you?" And he said, "No, by God, she killed me." And sure enough, before they could get him to the hospital, he died. So that's a story that gets passed on. Rodeo, we have because of our climate, we have a 12-month rodeo season. This is the Arcadia Rodeo, which is our oldest rodeo. Team roping in Williston. Roping would be akin to somebody in suburbia might belong to a bowling league, say. In cow country, roping is a common form of recreation, so it's an activity that men and women, it's totally both genders. You can see there's a woman in the background there in the queue to rope. So it's a very popular sport. We have a lot of rodeo heroes. Faye Blackstone, along with her husband, who's not shown here, they were both in a national, well, he was in the National Cowboys Hall of Fame, and she was in the National Cowgirls Hall of Fame, still are. And they were both from Parrish over in Manatee County. She was a trick rider. She just passed away this past year at about age 90. Pete Clemens, probably Florida's best known rodeo hero, won the all-around rodeo, all-around cowboy championship at the Silver Spurs 9 times. And he had to compete in 5 events to win at bull riding, bronc riding, roping, steer wrestling, I forget. Pete is the one on the left. Standing next to him is Buster Kenton, who is an artist and cartoonist who created this character, called him Cowboy Jake, for when Pete went out to this rodeo in Colorado and won everything, by the way. They didn't even know that we had cowboys before that, but they sure knew when he left. But that Cowboy Jake remains the mascot of Osceola High School today. Here's Matt Kondo, probably our greatest bucking horse rider. Josiah Johns, our most renowned Seminole historical rodeo champion. And most recently, Tater Porter, who won the National Professional Bull Riding Championship in the year 2000. And that was worth $400,000 to him. He retired in 2007, works on a ranch. High school rodeo, there's a couple hundred kids that compete in the high school rodeo circuit throughout the state. There's a young high school bull rider. There's an equal number of female high school rodeo participants, and this is one of the special events they have for women, which is called pole bending. It's something like barrel racing, but they go through a slalom course of poles. Rodeo queens, of course, are a big part of rodeo culture. Here we have on the right, Miss Silver Spurs, in the center, Little Miss Silver Spurs, and on the left is the national rodeo queen at the time. This was, I guess, probably 2008. Seminoles are very big in rodeo, and now with their casino money, they sponsor some big league rodeo events and teams. These are 3 Seminole rodeo queens. Ranch rodeo is where teams sponsored by ranches compete in ranch work type events. Most of the ranch rodeos require at least 1 female on the team. They're usually 5-member teams. And here she's just branded a calf with, they had to capture the calf, and she brands it with a branding iron that's not hot. It's just either painted, has white paint or white powder on it so they can see the brand. Wild cow milking is the pandemonium event for ranch rodeos. Cattle drives are a heritage event. We had a cattle drive in Osceola County, well, farther than that, I guess, in several counties, in 1995 to mark the sesquicentennial. And they tried to do it 10 years later, but they didn't get it done, so they did it in 2006, 11 years later, in Osceola County that time. Now, wrapping up here with the 21st century, of course, a lot of it is about embracing technology. Here's a Seminole woman at Big Cypress operating software at the shipping pens. And Seminoles were, I believe, the first cattle owners to have 100% electronic ID on their cattle. And that's this little thing here. It's basically like a barcode. It gets scanned with a wand. This is, and of course you can put all the breeding history, the nutritional history, the vaccination history, anything you want into that, the weights at different periods. So it's a great way to track the animals, inoculation and so forth. And you can see that's the old way. And interestingly enough, the Seminoles do it all. They brand, cut earmarks, and put the electronic IDs on. You might ask, why would somebody want to cut earmarks in addition to branding? And the reason is, brands are hard to read. The cattle has to be standing in a certain position, so you can see that brand it's usually on the right hip. Earmarks, you can see more easily. Also, often a cow is either coming or going straight at you, so you can read those earmarks more easily. And they don't have to be clean. Oftentimes the cows are pretty messy, especially certain times of year, and those brands can be real hard to read. Now that we have so many of these black cattle, it's even harder. Cell phone is used very much by cowboys, and most of them use the Nextel system, which allows a walkie-talkie that it even permits them to communicate when they're close, but in noisy environments, it's easier than trying to yell across a noisy cow pen. But also it can tell them if a truck is running late or something like that. And of course, the future is with the young people. Vocational agriculture is really big in cattle country. And then also FFA and 4-H. And that's where we're going to wrap up here with the new generation. Sorry, ran a little bit late. And by the way, Kaylee Dees, last I heard, was going to be a veterinarian, a large animal vet.